I would like to begin the conference by introducing Mr. Andreas Sohmen-Pao. Thank you very much for being with us today. Andreas is one of the global leaders in shipping and who, through mergers and acquisitions and organic fleet growth, has built one of the world's largest ship-owning and operating groups, BW Group. He is also the chairman of 5 publicly listed affiliates: BW LPG, BW Offshore, BW Energy, BW Epic Kosan, and Hafnia. Andreas is also committed to efforts to make the industry cleaner and has invested not only in his own shipping companies, but in innovative startup maritime companies with decarbonization as his target. He has also been chairman of the International Advisory Panel for Maritime Decarbonization. Interviewing Andreas today on the topic of Maritime in Transition, Balancing Profit and Purpose, is Mr. Abhishek Pandey, Global Head of Shipping at Standard Chartered Bank. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Abhishek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, Andreas, and thank you for joining us again. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our conversation today afternoon with Andreas, I'm pleased to inform you that Standard Chartered Bank has become a signatory to the Poseidon Principles, a global framework that will aim to align carbon emissions in the shipping industry with the international targets set by the United Nations. According to the IMO, maritime transport emits around 940 million tons of carbon annually and is responsible for around 2.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Standard Chartered and other bank signatories who commit to track, monitor, and drive down these global emissions today control a shipping portfolio in loans of about $185 billion. Indicatively, that's almost 50% of annual shipping finance available globally, making Poseidon Principles initiative a significant contributor to tackling climate change. Cutting carbon emissions in the shipping sector is crucial in curbing the worst effects of climate change and achieving net zero. As a bank that specializes in financing world commerce and the enablers of global trade, signing up to Poseidon Principles is therefore an important addition to our already existing efforts to reduce our financed emissions. Standard Chartered joins this initiative during Singapore Maritime Week in a nation state that is hugely important maritime hub. We look forward to partnering with our peers and clients globally to achieve the goals that we all share with the IMO. And with that, while we are on Singapore, let's start our conversation with the man himself, who is one of the key torchbearers of this maritime nation. Welcome once again, Andreas.
Thank you, Abhishek.
So if I may kickstart by asking you, what's on the top of your mind today?
So I suppose it includes all the usual things of supply and demand, decarbonization, and so on, which we'll come back to later. But maybe I should start by zooming out and saying one of the things I feel or think a lot about is that this seems like we're at a major societal turning point. And I think we'll look back at the 2020s as a time when many of the strong post-war trends started to take a decisive turn in a new direction. So if you look at a typical societal, we all know about shipping cycles, but if you look at a societal cycle, there are some who say that, you know, around every 80 years we go through this big cycle. And we're coming up for 80 years since the end of the Second World War. You typically have, each generation is about 20 years, 20 to 30 years, but you have a period after a war where you do rebuilding, you establish institutions, everybody is trying to make things right again. Then you have 20 years of a sort of plateau. Then you have 20 years where people start to take things for granted. And then you have 20 years where everything starts to unravel. And if we look at some of the different dimensions today, geopolitically it feels like things are unraveling. We have a sort of big nation, superpower, tensions growing. If you look at economics, you know, we have unprecedented levels of debt rising to stratospheric levels. It feels like a form of unraveling, which started in the GFC. If you look at society, there are signs of unraveling, whether it's racial tensions, whether it's dealing with migration issues and so on. And then added to all of this, we have a sort of climate unraveling where COVID has been framed also as sort of nature fighting back. Maybe we're confounding two different concepts, but it's sort of this nature question which feels like an unraveling. And so I think what we're going to see, summing it all up, is these significant shifts and also a redefinition of what is societally acceptable.
Thank you. Redefinition of societally acceptable. Do you mind telling us what does it actually look like?
So societal shifts are hard to get your hands around because they're bigger than all of us. But I think if you boil it down to what actions do individuals and businesses take, I mean, let's start with the political aspect. What do politicians do when there is a redefinition of what is societally acceptable, when you have this sort of unraveling? Well, they try to fight back by making sure that there is more redistribution. So we'll probably see more taxes, more redistributive policies. There will be some who will try to fight back against the geopolitical tensions and try to keep the peace on the geopolitical front. I think we'll certainly see and are seeing more climate regulation. So politicians will start to try to get ahead of the curve. And the question is going to be, do these trends move ahead of the response, or do we start to respond ahead of the trends? At a business level, there's going to be a new frame of reference, as I said, for what's acceptable. And we often think of business people as being economic creatures, that we are driven, largely or entirely by economic motives. But actually, we all know that human beings act in accordance with what their family and friends and peers think as well. So however driven you are by an economic imperative, it also matters to most people, at least, that their friends, family, stakeholders, partners, bankers, what they care about also influences decision making. And I think that's going to be a balancing force with pure economics. And we see signs of this everywhere, that people are reframing how they should respond to this changing societal framework.
Very interesting. Lots of different themes in motion there: societal redefinition, economics, politics, global trends, etc. Can you translate it all, let's say, in shipping context for us?
So, shipping has often operated on the premise of leave us alone. We don't ask anything from you, and in return, we don't want to be burdened by all your problems and challenges. We just want to get on with our business, thank you very much, and we operate in the international arena. And as a result, we've traditionally pushed back, for instance, against regulation on the industry because we sort of feel we want to be left alone. Of course, we accept safety improvements and so on, but we don't want all this new regulation historically. And I think this was different again during the war period, because there was a national service element where people maybe had this, other considerations, let's call it. But I'm describing the 70, 80 years since the war where, we've been focused more on the economic side. The tone is clearly shifting. Just as the shift is happening in society, I think we're seeing a shifting tone in shipping, and you see an unprecedented willingness to discuss decarbonization, as an example, to discuss carbon levies, to discuss new regulation. Yes, we're going to debate, should it be levies or should it be a traded scheme? do offsets really work? What is the future fuel going to be? I mean, there's plenty of debate, but the industry is acknowledging the problem and talking about solutions, and I think in a very different way from what was done historically. By the way, these forces don't have to be in opposition. You can save fuel, and economics can still do very well out of reducing fuel. And if slow steaming rebalances supply and demand, then fine. I mean, actually, that might be economically good. But I think the discourse has changed, the willingness to engage has changed. And I think people are sort of saying, what's the point of making a lot of money if we destroy the planet?
Very interesting. True. What's the point of making a lot of money if we destroy the planet? Now, I think probably not so long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or sorry, I'm facing this side, but equally involved on the right side as well. Just a few years ago, we talked about the advent of fossil fuel, and that was the advent of shale gas, which is fossil fuel related, and that was the topic of most of the conference for a couple of years. And today, we're talking about decarbonization. So what are your thoughts on energy transition, specifically with respect to the pace of it, how fast it is going to go, and what we should be thinking about keeping this speed in mind, because things are changing quite fast?
So like many transitions, I think it's going to start slowly and then it's going to go quickly. And we've seen that in so many spheres. I think it was Bill Gates who said, we overestimate the change that will happen in the next year and we underestimate the change that will happen in the next 10 years. I think there are two big mistakes that one can make here. One is to think that the energy transition is going to happen overnight. We've taken 100 years to build this incredible global energy system that's delivering 15 billion barrels of oil equivalent, 15 million barrels of oil equivalent per day. And, less than 20% of that is renewable. And for everyone who thinks we can go cold turkey and just switch it all off and it's all going to be fine because the sun and the wind is going to replace it overnight, it's just not going to happen. It's going to take a long time. On the other hand, to think that the energy transition is never going to happen is an equally big mistake, because when you marry human ingenuity with financial capital, which is happening now, an incredible amount of human ingenuity, and then this shift in the global capital flows, equity and debt, then I think we'll see big shifts happening.
And will these shifts be always going hand in hand and will provide an opportunity to balance a, so to say, paradigm shift in stuff with profitability in businesses?
So, it's a minefield which we have to navigate, and I think that it's not a straight line where you say, okay, here's a great new technology, here's a carbon-free fuel, and you know what, we're going to make lots of money on this. A lot of people are going into hydrogen, and there's tons of capital going in, and there's a lot of excitement, but a lot of people are going to lose their shirt on hydrogen. And, billions, hundreds of billions, trillions are going to go into hydrogen. And maybe, if we're lucky as humanity, we end up the other side with this incredible infrastructure and solutions. But, some investors will have lost their shirt on it. And we had the same, by the way, with railroads. And we had the same with fiber optic cable, where companies went bust right, left, and center trying to do it, and lost a lot of money. But on the other side, humanity came out with an incredible railroad infrastructure and an incredible fiber optic infrastructure, which we're still using today. So WorldCom went bust, but when the pandemic hit, we all switched over to Zoom, and it was fine, So maybe that's the same with hydrogen. I don't know, but I'm just saying if we invest enough, maybe humanity benefits, but it's a minefield.
But any further thoughts on the future fuels that you have? I mean, we talk a lot about LNG. Any specific thoughts around that?
Yeah. So, I hear people saying, and you all read the shipping press, and even last week, I hear people saying it's crazy that we're not shifting to LNG. And I hear people saying it's crazy to talk about a fossil fuel like LNG. We need to be shifting to ammonia and hydrogen. And personally, I think the only thing that is crazy is to think that we know the answer, or that there's a single answer. The answers depend on so many different things which we don't control. It depends on regulation. It depends on carbon taxes. It depends on technological breakthroughs. It depends on future trade flows. And we're talking about projecting 20 years into the future based on the life of a ship. So, anyone who knows what the world is going to look like 15 or 20 years from now should probably be doing something different from what they're currently doing.
So if I may ask you, what's BW doing? I mean, how are you handling, in the absence of these clear answers, your strategy?
So we're exploring, learning, investing in different things. LNG for some ships, LPG for other ships, methanol, batteries, biofuels, solar, wind. We're trying lots of different things. As a private company at the holding level, we have the luxury of being able to dabble and make mistakes and so on. So we have a couple of tankers which we're building on LNG fuel. We're not saying LNG is the perfect solution, but we're not saying it's unfathomable to use LNG selectively. We're converting large gas carriers to LPG propulsion. We're investing in a methanol plant. We're shareholders in Corvus, which is the leading battery supplier to the maritime industry. We've done some joint research work on ammonia, and then biofuel, solar, wind. I mean, some of these are, like our solar team it has nothing to do with maritime. It's onshore solar, team based out of Canada and working in North America. But we're on the learning curve and we're trying to understand. So maybe one day there's floating solar, just to understand how renewable energy will fit into, new fuels and so on. Lots of different things.
And how do you think exactly you can pivot such a probably traditional business as shipping into some new areas that we just spoke about?
So for us, it's about trying, and it's about sometimes making mistakes. We started investing in environmental technologies about 12 years ago with a business that we called BW Ventures, and we bought into ballast water management systems, carbon nanotubes for better paints, hull cleaning robots, more efficient electrical motors, water treatment, and we lost a lot of money. I mean, it was not a good economic investment because a lot of these companies, didn't make it, like typical venture capital. So I'm not recommending this is a path to sort of fantastic profits, but we still hope some of the original investments will do okay. Corvus is one of them, a battery company. And we're still investing. Einstein said that the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again with the hope of a different outcome. And I'd like to think that we're not being insane by continuing on this because, first of all, we're trying to do things a little bit differently. We're being more thoughtful about scaling and getting the sizing right. And we're just trying to recognize that sitting still is not going to make progress either. So, you sort of pick yourself up, you bandage up your wounds, and you carry on trying. We have some really exciting businesses in the portfolio now. So in wind, for instance, we have Cadeler, and which is doing wind turbine installation vessels listed in Norway, and we've invested in BW Ideol, which is a floating floating wind business, which is also listed in Norway.
Thank you very much for sharing the BW Ventures story as well. I consider, I pivoted a little bit more on the other side. Being the Marine Money Forum, I should come back to some finance and deal-related questions. So it's been a very busy period for you with 7 deals of your companies in the past 12 months, and I was looking at it. So there was Navigator, there was Lauritsen, Avance, Dr. Cadeler, Ideal, and recently even Ultragas. What's behind this? What's the thought process?
So it has been really busy, and actually one of the benefits of COVID, as we all know, is actually things can happen at tremendous velocity because you just click on a button and you're connected with people versus getting on planes and flying halfway around the world. So we could get a lot done in the last 12 months. We've always said that we believe stronger, larger platforms can produce better results. And I come across people who say that they don't believe this. We look at the statistics. Hafnia produced a 14% ROE in 2020. Its closest peer achieved 5% ROE, and a smaller peer achieved 0. BW LPG last year produced an 18% ROE, while our closest peers achieved 13 and 7. The dividend yield last year for BW LPG was 20% in a zero interest rate world. We listed the business for about $850 million in 2013. 850 million. We've paid 750 million in dividends, and the business is still worth over $900 million in market cap. And I'm not saying this is a kind of selling point, it's just statistics. But even if the results were the same, and they're not, I think one shouldn't be in the public markets unless you're trying to grow and create better trading liquidity for your shareholders. And so combining companies, growing, consolidation, for me boils down to 2 things. First of all, do you believe in the facts, or do you believe in alternative facts, as one famous politician put it? The second thing is, are you willing to partner and share in order to deliver better results for your shareholders? We're happy to partner with others. We're even happy to let them take the driving seat if we think that they're going to be good stewards of capital. We have partnerships with public investors, with sovereign wealth funds, with private equity firms, customers, Japanese trading houses, even fellow shipping companies. And we think that partnership is a good way to go if you find the right partners and you deliver better results.
And when you talk about partners, what about the retail investors, the public markets? What do you think about it? They're traditional ship owners like late John Angelakousis, who didn't really believe they were right for shipping. And then we had some public market activity and corporate actions where they were taken back on the market to privatizations. What are your thoughts on shipping and public markets then?
So public markets can be very frustrating. I mean, why do people want to buy more ships when prices are high at the top of the cycle, and then they don't want to invest money when it's low and it's the right time to be investing? Why are 2 companies valued the same based on NAV when one is producing double the profits of the other one? And I think the answer is, if your holding period is less than a year, then actually you don't even care that much about earnings. You just want the share price to move in the right direction. But if you're a long-term shareholder, you do care, or if you're financing a business, you do care about earnings and profits. And the way we think about public markets is that you can get the best of both worlds. If the markets don't value you properly, then just run a great business, take out the profits as dividends, and it's just like a private company. You're getting good earnings and you're running a good business. But then you can also use your shares as currency, either when the market values you properly or if other people are willing to do NAV to NAV deals. So I think it's sort of maybe too simplistic to say, oh, public markets, bad, private, good. public markets can be as effective as private, but with some added benefits.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And what are your thoughts about the other forms of financing? Access is limited to a few companies, if I may say that, or it is available, to almost everyone, given the dynamics that we have seen change very rapidly in the last few years?
So I'll keep my answer fairly short because I'm conscious we're probably running short of time. But, I think basically we see there's still good access to financing if one comes with the right company, the right project, and I'm sure many others have good access to financing. I mean, my main hope is that this period of more discerning capital and bank financing continues because, there are differences between companies, and I think that it's right actually that, banks support companies that they feel are going to be good stewards of capital and, make the differentiation that we're seeing today.
Any other concerns that you have today, since we started with your thoughts on today?
So as a sort of summary, I would say at a macro level, it's money supply and inflation and how on earth do we get ourselves out of this QE mess that we're in. I mean, I say mess, it's all working okay for now, but it's just, unbelievable. Money supply growth in the US in 2020 was more than the last 5 recessions combined. If you look at the chart of M2 growth, it's gone sort of through the roof. And the only reason why we're not really seeing, the effects of it yet is because velocity has collapsed. So if you look at velocity of money, it just has fallen off a cliff because people are all stuck at home and not traveling and spending in the same way. Let's wait and see now when demand starts to pick up and we come out of COVID and velocity picks up, what happens as a result of that money supply growth. And when all this pent-up spending power and helicopter money starts to take off. On a shipping side, in terms of concerns, it's the usual supply-demand concerns. I think we've been through a period of really good discipline, but if the markets take off, maybe animal instincts come back. And my last one in terms of concerns would be at a human level, just to be conscious of the untold suffering and mental strain, not least on our seafarers. And, it's sort of easy to sit here and in safe, comfortable Singapore and feel like the world is going on as usual and deals are happening and everything else, but there's a lot of suffering. So that would be my main concern.
Yeah, and yesterday in Singapore Maritime Week, this was one of the key discussion points. And since we are in Singapore, any comments on how Singapore is doing overall as a maritime hub and with maritime activities?
So, I think that the way to ask the question is, what do you want from a country or a government? You want it to keep its people safe, which means safe from violence, safe from disease, safe from racial tension, attacks. I think Singapore gets an A+. You want a government to ensure that people can earn a living, which means good jobs, ease of doing business. I think Singapore gets an A+. You want to be sure that the infrastructure works, telecoms, ports, water, energy. I think Singapore gets an A+. You want to be sure that it provides a level playing field. No corruption, no one's above the law. I think Singapore gets an A+. Sometimes we get distracted by little things. So we say, oh, a train broke down over here, or there was some minor flooding over there. We're being too strict over COVID, or, this politician said something in the wrong tone or the wrong way, chose the wrong words, whatever. At times like those, I think we should pick one of the other 192 countries in the world and go and live there for a while. And then we will realize that we really are in an extraordinary place and very lucky to be here. And the last thing I would say on that is, you know, it's a place where ideas get turned into reality. So you can have an idea about a decarbonization center, and as you'll all have heard, it happens. You can talk about levies and channeling R&D back into the industry. It happens. This is a place where ideas turn into reality.
Thank you. Thank you for putting it so honestly and eloquently. Lastly, I think we come to the end of the session. Just one last question. When you are not juggling with these complex thoughts and taking these assertive actions, like taking 12 companies into M&A in the last 12 months, what does Andreas's free time, if any, look like?
So, you know, last time I was on a Marine Money panel, I shared, you know, one of these insights, and it turned into an article which made me sound a bit like a weirdo, which was talking about roasting my own coffee and so on. So I'm going to play it really safe and straight down the middle and say I play tennis, which is true. I love tennis and I play a lot of tennis, but it's hopefully there's no kind of article that comes out of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you so much for joining us. Really nice to have you here, and especially, you know, a lot of it didn't really had to come in from the questions. It was a real pleasure to have you over here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Andreas, thanks for sharing your valuable thoughts with us in such an articulate fashion. And Abhishek, once again, congratulations to Standard Chartered for signing and joining the Poseidon Principles.